Hi everyone and welcome. I'm Ralph Kircher. I'm one of the team that's been working for more than a year to bring you the all-new Garden Center show. Well, we're really excited about what's in store for the show in Milwaukee, August 9th to 11th. We're hoping to share that excitement with you throughout the year with our series of webinars to help strengthen independent garden centers. And so today, we bring you a topic we think will resonate with most IGCs, hiring staff. Somewhat lost in the past 2 years of worries about the pandemic and supply chain troubles has been that ever-nagging challenge of attracting and hiring the right people. It's a challenge that never went away and seems even more intractable today. Here to help you with that and provide suggestions is Andrea Hill, who has written a book on that very subject called the How to Hire Handbook for Small Business Owners. I've known Andrea for more than 10 years, and her company, Hill Management Group, are the creative geniuses behind the Garden Center Show website and many of the emails you've been receiving. Her firm provides consulting, business development, and marketing services to help small businesses grow profitably and competitively. Before I welcome Andrea, I'd like to make one more plug for the Garden Center Show. If you haven't yet registered, do so today at gardencentershow.com. And please tell your suppliers they need to be exhibiting in Milwaukee if they really want to reach the best IGCs in the country. I look forward to meeting all of you in person in August. And welcome, Andrea, and take it away.
All right, thanks, Ralph. And again, welcome everyone. I'm really happy to have this opportunity to share this information with the independent garden center community. And I want to thank Garden Center Show for making this possible. It's very fun to work with a conference that is so dedicated to providing educational content and business information with its audience. So now I'm going to switch over to the slides because we have a lot of information to cover. And I want to leave plenty of time to answer questions. So we're going to jump right in. So we're talking about employee recruiting strategies for IGCs. And let me see if I can get the slide to switch. Okay, next slide. The American economy is down nearly 4 million jobs since before COVID-19. And while there was a lot of speculation in mid-2020 that it all had to do with people enjoying retirement benefits or unemployment benefits, the end of the unemployment benefits didn't turn into more workers. And that's because the problem was much more complex than that. You don't have to own a restaurant or a hotel or a delivery service or some other kind of business dependent on low-wage employees to feel the impact of the Great Resignation. But I think it's really useful in a conversation about hiring and recruiting to start by understanding what's going on based on the numbers. It's interesting to note that we've lost somewhere between 1.8 million and 2.5 million workers due to death from COVID or long COVID. And that's excluding the preponderance of COVID deaths that happened in people over retirement age. It's just including the numbers under the age of 65. And since long COVID is the biggest part of that number, and it primarily affects people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, this was a significant hit to the workforce. Next, the challenges of pandemic life led to about 3 million excess retirements since the beginning of 2020. So retirements over what would normally be anticipated in terms of total retirements in any given year. Even before the pandemic, we knew that the wave of baby boomer retirements was going to put a strain on employment. But the pace of boomer retirements during the pandemic, it boomed. So in a normal year, there would be a certain number of people retiring. We had excess over that. And then we normally have a certain number of retirees that return to the workforce after retirement. Prior to the pandemic, that was about 4% of retirees. In 2020, that number cratered. We had people retiring, but not returning. Like it went down to below 0.5%. By October of 2021, which is the last time we have numbers for re-entry from retirees, the unretirement rate, that's a real term, was back up to about 2.6%. So there's some recovery there, but we're not back to where we were. So even before the malaise that set in on the American workforce, the impacts of COVID illness and COVID death have been significant. And that was between 1% and 2% of the workforce, which may not seem like a lot of people, but if you consider that the unemployment rate in 2019 was only 3.6%, that 1% to 2% is a lot of people. So that's the first thing that we want to think about in terms of what's really going on with this great resignation, as it's being referred to. Then I recently read a McKinsey interview of a woman, Lieutenant Colonel Andrea Horn. She's a military veteran who's an executive vice president of workforce at the Tilson Corporation. She described a theory about what's going on with American workers that I thought was really interesting and useful. She said that after each of her 5 tours of duty between 2003 and 2010, 4 of which were in Afghanistan or Iraq, when she would return each time, she and all of her fellow service people that were returning would be coached about how to reintegrate into their normal lives after the trauma of deployment. She said, this is a quote, "I'd sit in a dark theater on post to receive a mandatory return and reintegration brief from the chaplain. The chaplain would tell us that things would feel different, that even though you're happy to be back, you'll feel like you don't fit in, or that your family won't understand you, or that you don't understand people who didn't deploy and you're not sure why. They tried to prep us to be more aware of these internal feelings and to act on them accordingly, not emotionally." Horn goes on in that interview to say that we've all suffered collective trauma. We were effectively deployed during the pandemic. From shutdowns and isolation to stress and anxiety over finances and our futures, to our businesses suffering, to not knowing when the world would get back to normal, to not being able to trust or understand the information that was being shared. And Horn posits that this collective trauma, without any guidance from a chaplain skilled in helping us figure out how to undeploy, to re-enter life after trauma, is what has left people feeling so frustrated and angry and dissatisfied and adrift. She said that at Tilson, they've started dealing, well, at the beginning, they were asking themselves, related to the turnover, how do we reduce the turnover? That was their big question. We've got to stop the churn. But since then, thinking about these ideas about collective trauma, they've advanced to asking themselves, how can we make work the place that helps people feel normal again? How can we make work the place that provides the kind of purpose and direction and security and dignity that people crave and they need right now to keep them in place? She said that their focus then became on dignity and purpose and security and direction. And these are powerful keys to business culture. Of course, these characteristics are always present in strong, productive business cultures. These aren't new ideas for business culture. And these have always been the kinds of businesses that attract the best workers and keep them. And part of what we're talking about today is how do we attract the best workers and how do we do it all the time? For a really long time, we've been in an employer's market, the equivalent of a seller's real estate market. So prior to the pandemic, all employers really had to do to hire was run an ad, and you could be pretty sure that at least some good candidates would show up. But that's not our reality anymore. Now we're in a buyer's real estate market. We're in an employee's market. And just like in the buyer's real estate market, where the home sellers have to do a lot more work, where they have to plan to be on the market for longer, and they have to work hard to show why their home is better than the competition, that's the market we're in for employment today. So we're talking about recruiting and hiring in a buyer's market, an employee's market. And that means we have to focus a lot more attention on what we as employers have to sell. The last time we saw anything close to a candidate market of this magnitude was actually in the late 1990s. But even then, there wasn't nearly as much opportunity for candidates to jump jobs for higher wages and better work experience. It just wasn't that competitive. To see a time when the employees market was this competitive, you have to go back to the 1960s when wages had been growing consistently for over a decade. It was a time known as workers' paradise. In the time since then, as there were almost always consistently more workers than jobs, then employers were able to get away with offering a bit less and still attracting employees. Sort of like being the only boy at the dance. Doesn't matter how awkward you are, you're still going to have dance partners. But today, things are different. Attracting employees today requires paying attention to these 4 pillars of employer attractiveness, and that's offering competitive compensation, cultivating a positive business culture, paying attention to creating work-life balance for employees, and giving all employees the opportunity to have a voice in the business, to be valued as contributors and not just as worker bees. Each one of these pillars is worthy of exploration, but that's not on our agenda today because that's an entire webinar unto itself. For today's topic, it's just important to recognize that it's nearly impossible in the current environment to successfully recruit and hire if you aren't able to convince recruits that your business offers these pillars as part of your aspect of being an employer. The truth is, we probably always should have been marketing our businesses as employment opportunities. And many of you do. But when things are easy, we have a tendency to forget about marketing. Kind of, if the foot traffic's just rolling in, we may get lax on marketing our business and our product. And I think we get lax about marketing ourselves as employers as well. It's not unlike the garden center industry coming out of the 1980s and into the 1990s. Before the 90s, most people bought garden products at a specialty store. One didn't have to be particularly motivated or creative about marketing. The business walked in. They knew that's where they had to go to find the products that you sell. But when the garden center world was really pushed into by the big boxes, then specialty stores quickly started working on marketing their differentiation. And employers everywhere are in this same position now. And it doesn't feel very good. This incredibly tight market requires employers to not only do all the normal marketing that you have to do, but you also have to market yourself as a place to work. And to do that, we need to differentiate ourselves. So to find our employer differentiation, we have to consider what it is we have to sell. In this case, it's the opportunity. We're selling the opportunity to work at our place of business. And we have to consider who this opportunity will be most appealing to. Now, most of you probably already hire from among some of your most avid customers, and that's the right thought process. The people who love the product are also probably the people most interested in working with the product and have a leg up on the training around the product. But what's our definition or differentiation is a very important question to be asking. So the first thing I'd like to ask you to do is to keep in mind this idea of a sales funnel. You're probably already accustomed to thinking about sales funnels for your product and service sales. And I assume this model is pretty familiar to all of you, but have you considered that there's also a sales funnel for attracting employees? It looks a little different. The premise is the same as the product and service sales funnel, but the levels are what's different. So at the top of the funnel, we want to work to get the attention of a wide pool of potential employees. You want potential employees to be aware of your brand, and the truth is you don't have to be Google to do it. Then in the consideration phase, the second level of your attraction funnel is when potential candidates start considering the benefits you offer as an employer. They may not be actively even looking for work yet, but they're curious enough to dig into your company and learn a bit more. So the question is, can they learn a bit more? How are they going to find this information about what your company is like as an employer? Then during the interest phase, the candidate becomes much more vested in this idea of working for your company. They may have a job already. They may not be ready to give notice and switch jobs yet or to apply to you, but they've become incredibly interested. And chances are you still don't know about them. I'm hearing someone say she can't hear or see anything. Is anybody else having video or audio problems? Let's just get a quick check to make sure it's coming through clear. Laura, you might want to switch browsers to a Chrome or a Firefox browser. Chrome and Firefox tend to give the best viewing experience, and Safari tends to be really rough. So, and this is being recorded and will be shared later. So if you do miss something, you'll be able to see it later. Okay, so during this interest phase, they're getting interested in your company, and you're not even communicating with them yet because you probably don't know they're interested. It's during the action phase that candidates take the leap to apply. So look at all these things that are happening before you even know somebody's interested in applying. Let's take a look at each of these phases a little bit more closely. The first thing you're doing in the awareness phase is you're marketing for recruit awareness, and this should be a constant process. Once you build your business into a recruitment engine, then you've always got some candidates in the wings that are interested in working for you, and that you may have already qualified as you being interested in them. Now, my company's headquartered in rural Wisconsin in a tiny little town, but because I speak frequently to college graduating classes, I have this constant pool of potential employees applying to work with us. So if you take the time to work job fairs and participate in career day activities with educational institutions, you develop relationships with their placement offices, and you create brand awareness among potential candidates for your company. The truth is, most students graduating from college have almost no clue about all the different types of work that is available to them. They know what their parents did. They might know what their friends' parents did. They might know about the few jobs that came to their attention because of their interests in high school, but it's only a fraction of what's out there that most high school students and college students are aware of. So we have to work to build this awareness. There are a lot of other ways to make potential employees aware of your brand. Your volunteer work in the community, participation with local sports programs, memberships in charitable organizations. These are all ways of building awareness, not just for the products that you sell, but for your brand as a potential place to work. I remember speaking with a young entrepreneur who said, we were talking about networking in the community, oh, I don't need to do that kind of networking because the people around here aren't my target customers. It hadn't occurred to him that they are his target employees. Now, I know that your local community is also your target customer, but we need to be networking with recruitment in mind as well. Also, don't get sidelined from this type of effort by worrying, well, I don't hire new people very often. Your job as a hiring marketer is to build a portfolio of contacts for when you do need to hire. I'm hiring someone in the next week or two that I've known for 6 or 7 years now. They've just been kind of in my portfolio. We've been kind of in her portfolio. Now the time is right, and that's going to happen. So just because I didn't need to hire someone at the time we had that first conversation doesn't mean it wasn't a good conversation to have. And the 2 hires before that were people I've known for over a decade, same situation. So the work of the awareness phase of the funnel is to create a large enough pool of brand aware candidates that you have a few good choices to work with when the time is right. I much prefer the experience of tapping on someone I've had a conversation with before, even if it was 3 years ago, than to having to run a blind ad and wonder who's going to show up, if someone will show up, and if they'll be the right person. Finally, remember that all the elements you put on your website should be contributing to your SEO, not just for the products that you sell, but for your brand as an employer. People are on Google searching for more than just things to buy. They're searching for things like best place to work near me, great jobs in Des Moines, companies to work for in Bridgeport, Glassdoor reviews in Houston. If you have a lot of rich content on your website about your company as a place to work, then people who are searching for job information will be able to find you. And that's part of your funnel for recruiting as well. So now let's talk about this consideration phase. So if a potential recruit has made it through the awareness phase and they're still interested in your company, they want to know more about the benefits of working for your company. During this phase, they want to know more about what you do, who you serve, and what you stand for. Now that you're on that person's radar, how do you build enough trust for them to even consider working for you? And again, where are they going to find this information, and how easy it is, or how easy is it for them to find? If they visit your business as a customer, that's one way to find out. You want to be thinking about what everyone experiences when they walk in the door, not just in terms of the experience of you as a place to buy things, but also what do they think of the atmosphere and the culture and the idea of your place as a place to work? When they visit your website, what can they learn about your core values and your business ethics? If they ask around, what will others say about their experience or the experience of someone they know that works for or worked for your company? And wouldn't it be really cool if they asked someone who works for your company if that employee could hand them a recruitment card that said, hey, we're always looking for great people. Don't know if we have any jobs available now, but you could always call and get more information about the company this way. So they walk in your store, they go to your website, they interact with your people out in the world, and all of the information they're collecting tells them about your company as a place to work. Even a one-person company, a two-person company should have this information available on its website, because someday you won't be a one-person company or a two-person company. And at the point that you need to scale your business, or you're ready to scale your business, the most important thing you need to do first is get staffed with interested and informed employees. It's also more important now than ever to convey your commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, to having a business culture that welcomes people of all types and perspectives. So talk about what you have done and what you plan to do as a company to ensure that you have that welcoming business culture, and that all your teams embrace the importance of making the entry into your company an experience of dignity and respect and inclusion and welcome. Many people join companies only to find that it's very difficult to start feeling part of the company. So team culture and how teams welcome in employees, that information gets outside your walls pretty fast. You want it to be great information. Today's employees want to work for a company that shares their values. They want to do work that provides a sense of purpose. They want to have the opportunity or the potential for personal and professional growth. And by the way, that doesn't necessarily mean climbing up a leadership type ladder or a management ladder. Professional growth has an awful lot to do with how much can they learn, how much can they explore, what kinds of new experiences will they have as part of that work. I'm encouraging people these days to not think of professional growth in companies, particularly in small businesses. We just don't have that many levels. It's not so much growing up a hierarchy or a ladder. It's more like a river, and where will it take you? There are a lot of people who don't have a desire to run the company, but they do want a job that will give them long-term sense of purpose and personal growth. So, and when I say opportunity for professional development, I don't want you to think I'm just talking about, oh, but how many management jobs do I have? It's not so much about that. So they want that opportunity for personal and professional growth. And they also recognize, today's employees, that the day-to-day relationships that they have that happen at work, they greatly influence the quality of their personal life. And so what happens at work has to be qualitative for them. So this is what's happening in the consideration phase, and the kinds of things your business needs to be signaling to potential candidates. Now, at some point, recruits become vested in the idea of working for a company. This isn't the moment they apply. Like I said before, that can actually come later. But it's the moment they realize that they've started thinking about what it would be like to work for you and with you. And at this point in the recruiting funnel, you need to cement that feeling by not only sharing what you offer employees, but also the stories and testimonials of current employees, past employees, interns. You need to create this authentic, trustworthy story about your desirability as an employer. It's a lot like selling the rest of your business, right? We sell products with stories. We sell coming into a retail store with stories. Well, we also need to tell the stories of the experience of working for you. Another thing to consider is how both present and past employees speak about their work experience on social media. There's this tendency among employers to want to squash any discussion about the workplace on social media or even on personal social profiles. But the reality is it's next to impossible to do. So the best thing you can do is not worry about what people have to say, because you've created this positive people-centric work culture. And then people can talk about where they work, and it can feed public perception about what a great place your place is to work. Now, this doesn't mean that you never have a workplace in which, I'm saying this funny, this doesn't mean that you should aspire to have a workplace where there's never a single problem. That's not even realistic. But it does mean that you create a workplace in which no matter what problems occur, what things you have to solve or issues you have to deal with, that you deal with them in a way that people feel valued and respected and elevated throughout. So you don't need a perfect workplace, but you need a workplace that people will say positive things about, even in spite of problems. These days, most communities and regions have a best place to work type competition. It's usually run by regional media outlets, but sometimes it's through chambers of commerce. Participating in these competitions is incredibly valuable, particularly for small businesses, when our ability to compete for employees is hard compared to some of the larger employers. But being able to put voted best place to work in Kansas City 2021 on your website, that's a huge trust builder. Just the information that someone in this interest phase of the funnel needs to see. And then finally, the action phase. We had a client who asked us to create an employment section on their website, a great plan. But one of the tasks was to convert their employment application to an online form that could be submitted digitally. Again, the right idea. Let's get instant employment applications. So I was participating in the proofing of the site, and I went into this form and started filling it out. And I quickly started feeling this pit in my stomach. It was this company that I'd worked with for years and was filled with warm and wonderful people. The experience of doing their job application, it was like, oh, they were coming off like Vlad the Impaler. It was just such a threatening experience. And coercive. The application actually felt rude in the way that it asked some questions. Now, there are certain things we need to legally ask in an employment application, but the way we ask can have an awful lot to do with how somebody feels about applying. Again, if you're in an employer market, maybe it's not such a big deal, but now we're in an employee market. And how your application is worded can mean the difference between turning up or turning off all that interest that the employee has ignited, or the potential employee, in the earlier stages of the sales funnel. Another thing candidates complain about a lot is being asked for a resume, then being required to fill in every single box in the application that they've already provided on their resume. You just hear this all the time, all that employment and education history. Now, if you're using an HR software that integrates all of those pieces of data into a central recruit database, then asking them to fill it all out on the application may be necessary. And it can be an important part of ensuring that your employment activity is properly diverse and equitable. But if you're a small company and your employment records are primarily paper, and you don't really have an intention of paying for a big HR software, then you can make this step easier for people. Just make it clear on the application that if their resume includes their full work history, they don't have to fill in all those boxes. Staple the application and the resume together for your recruiting file, and you're good to go. It's hard to compete against bigger employers, but this is something that works for small businesses that does not work for big businesses, and even something as small as this can be a differentiator for you. Now, once your employment application is up to snuff, what happens when a candidate completes it? Do they send the application into a dark hole and never hear back from anyone ever again? Do they receive information from you that helps them establish expectations? Do they know, like, I'll get a phone call, or I won't get a phone call, or I'll get an email in 2 weeks? Like, what are the expectations you set when you receive an application? Even if it's as simple as looking at an application and saying, this person's just never going to be a fit here. I just already know it. And then just letting them know you don't look like a good fit based on your experience or whatever. Even saying no is a proper way of setting expectations. Following up to applications is such an important part of keeping recruit interest alive. And it's never been easier than to have a form trigger a thing, just like you do when people sign up for your email list on your website. You can set up automations that immediately respond, thank them, tell them what's next. You've thought it through in advance, so this can go out to everyone automatically. And if it's well written and warm and feels personalized, that's a great way to do it, and it doesn't cost you any administrative time. Even if you're not hiring, so you've got your application up all the time, and I encourage you to have applications up all the time. But even if you're not hiring, it's in your best interest as a recruiter to follow up with employment applications, even if it's just a quick 10-minute phone call. This will create a memorable experience for the candidate. It's very memorable when somebody calls you and says, I'm not hiring now, but I really appreciate you submitting an application, and I just wanted to touch base with you and tell me one thing about why you thought we'd be a great place to work for. And you listen to them for a minute and you establish a connection, and then you can say, I'm going to hold on to your application. I'll give you a call if something pops up, and feel free to stay in touch or pop in. That kind of connection is something that sticks with people. I know I've found some of my best recruits through calls like this. Both people I hired relatively quickly thereafter and people that I hired years later. So maintaining communication in spite of your current hiring status is always valuable. So there you have it. That's a recruiting sales funnel. And the reason it was worth going through in that kind of detail is because hopefully it's helping you think about the recruiting and hiring process differently, and seeing that you're playing a long game, and there are things you can be doing all the time, many of which don't need your attention every day once you've set them up, that will help ensure you have candidates coming into your pipeline in the future. So now, let's talk about what employees want. So these are the underlying values that should inform your offering as an employer. Now, there's some perception that these things maybe weren't as important before, but they're suddenly important because of the pandemic. That couldn't be further from the truth. These values have always been important to employees. The only difference is that employees today see an opportunity to demand these values for themselves, even if it means holding out for a job that will provide them. Past and present employees may stay with companies that don't provide these values, but the trade-off is that those employees may not be giving their all to the job, and that means that you're not realizing their full value. So anything you can do as an employer to convey these authentic values of a business, or whatever your set of these values is, will make it easier to find quality employees, and it will make your own work experience more rewarding too. So now let's talk about advertising for the jobs you want to fill, and how to put marketing out there that brings the right candidates. Have you ever sat down to write a job description? Like, you need someone. You've already thought through that you need a person. And you think you know what you need because, you're doing the work yourself and you're sick and tired of doing that work yourself. But then you sit down to write the ad and you literally cannot come up with the words for the ad. In most cases, this happens because there's some important pre-work that needs to get done. If you're like most small business owners, you realize you need to hire someone, or at least you finally accept that you need to hire someone, when you've been putting in 18-hour work days and you've started losing sleep at night. But ideally, the time to decide when to hire and what type of person to hire is before the need to hire has throttled your productivity. And to do that, you need two types of planning. You need strategic planning and you need skills planning. The first type of planning you need to have in place is business strategy. That's because to hire the right employees, you need to know what you're trying to accomplish with your business and in what time frame. For example, if your plan is to grow 15% in the next year, What aspects of your business will experience the stress of that growth? And what kind of people do you need in your business then to make sure that the growth does not lead to that stress? What skills do they need? So each time you review or update your business plan, make sure you're taking time to consider the implications of your plan on your staff and on your staffing levels. So you're going to review the questions in this slide. And these slides will be immediately downloadable at the end of this session. When we end the session, you'll go to a page that has a button to download them. So knowing the answers to these questions will give you insight into the types and numbers of people you need before the need becomes desperate. The key is to put hiring into your plans and not just do hiring as a reaction. After business strategy, the key to hiring the right people on time is to know which skills and competencies your business needs. Most businesses understand the importance of forecasting cash flow and projecting inventory requirements and planning for capital and anticipating the need for more space. But few small businesses do an adequate job of forecasting the need for particular types of jobs or skills. So I'm going to show you two simple methods you can master for planning for hiring and growth. Before you ever try to write that job ad, if you do these two things, the job ad will just flow for you. So the first thing is a SWOT. I'm sure you know what a SWOT analysis is. It's a common tool that helps identify the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats that a company has or faces. And SWOT analyses help you develop strategies for bolstering your advantages and mitigating problems. Now, in my experience, doing big sweeping SWOT analyses yields a whole lot of information that isn't particularly useful. They're just too generic. In the broad type of SWOT analysis, the strengths that matter, the strengths that come up aren't necessarily the strategic strengths, or they may be things that you're focusing on too much to the detriment of other things. What you want to do is you want to focus on the strengths that have the most strategic impact, and you want to focus on the weaknesses that are most likely to undermine your success. A great opportunity for one garden center may not be a great opportunity for another garden center because your strategies, your regions, your specialties, they're different. So the best type of SWOT analysis to do is a very focused SWOT analysis. In this approach, what you're going to do is you're going to do a SWOT for each of your functional areas or departments. You're not doing a SWOT for employees. You're analyzing the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for your people, your staffing in horticulture and product management, or customer service, or sales, or bookkeeping, or inventory and purchasing. You're looking just at that department and you're doing a SWOT analysis. When you take the time to consider each of the departments in your business, probably similar to the bulleted list at the top of this sheet, but you may have different departments that I didn't include there, but whatever your departments are, when you take the time to look at each department individually and ponder that department's current strengths and weaknesses and where the opportunities could be, you're going to come up with a much clearer idea of how you could be staffing your company. And you'll see in the next tool that I'm going to teach you, you may realize how much more of your staffing you could accomplish, or staffing needs you could fulfill with the people that you already have. So this is how a SWOT might look for customer service. So in the left-hand column, we have our strengths. And those are things that we don't want to ignore when we're focusing on our weaknesses. We say, these are our strengths. They're important that they're strengths. We're going to make sure we shore up these strengths and don't lose any ground there. Your weaknesses are things you're going to attach action items to. And then opportunities that exist that you haven't quite grabbed yet in that department. And then threats to your success as a company because of any threats to that department. So that's how a SWOT looks when it's illustrated. The other thing that happens when small business owners do a SWOT analysis like this is they often find out that they're personally playing too big a role in all the departments. You already know you don't have limitless capacity, but this will put it very clearly in front of you that you're filling too much of the strengths, and one of the weaknesses is that you depend too much on yourself. So the SWOT's helpful for that as well. So do a SWOT analysis for each department to understand what your true employment needs are, or training. Then the next tool is a skill matrix. Now, like the SWOT, a skill matrix is a visual tool. This is really important because when we have visual tools like this, I just went back to the SWOT slide for a moment. A visual tool like this helps us stay focused on what we need to do in a way that a written document or a memory will not. So when you do your SWOT analyses, hang them up on your wall or get them in a folder that's right on your desk so you can stay focused on the actions you decide to take as a result of it. Well, the skill matrix is also a visual tool. Whereas the SWOT analysis helps you identify how you need to invest in human resources at the department level, the skill matrix helps you identify what you need to do at the individual level. So just like the SWOT, you do the skill matrix by department. If you do the skill matrix across the whole company at once, it gets unfocused and meaningless and too big. It's helpful the skill matrix is helpful for helping you decide how to solve your staffing problems. So sometimes it's not hiring that you need to do. Sometimes it's training that you need to do. Sometimes you need to move people around. Sometimes you need to promote from within. Sometimes you'll see an opportunity to outsource. And yes, sometimes you'll clarify your needs for hiring. But before you sit down to write that help wanted ad, this information on a department by department level, the same bulleted list on that previous slide or whatever your departments are, is going to give you some real clarity about what you really need to solve your hiring problems. I was working with a client who was trying to hire an assistant for herself. So she owns the company, she has 18 employees, and she knew she needed an assistant, but she couldn't quite put into words the list of tasks that she wanted this assistant to do. Every time she did, it didn't add up to a full-time job, but she knew she had more than a full-time job worth of help that was needed. Once we did the skill matrix, she recognized that she is not good at selling, even though she's great at customer service. So part of her desire to hire an assistant was to give her more time to focus on selling, which in fact, she's not good at. So she also realized that at the same time when she did the skill matrix, and this is a pretty close approximation of this particular skill matrix, she also realized nobody else was particularly good at selling. Everybody was good at service. Nobody was good at selling. And it became clear to her in the process that she didn't need to hire an assistant. She needed to hire a salesperson. Then she could step out of the selling responsibilities, which would free her up to do other things once that person was trained. And those things that she'd be freed up to do were the things she is good at. And she could hire somebody who was really good at sales. So that's just a kind of long way of telling you sometimes the thing we think we need to hire isn't really the hire that would make the most difference to our company. And a skill matrix will help you see that. Another way that the skill matrix can work is to reveal hidden talents within your organization, which allows you to do a better job of promoting and hiring from within. We've probably all had that experience of suddenly seeing an employee in a new light and just realizing how much they have to offer and that it's more than we previously realized. When we're busy running a business, the most competitive and ambitious employees grab most of our attention. And then the employees who are seriously underperforming grab the rest of it. But there are often people in the middle who are competent and reliable and trustworthy, who might be perfect for filling a gap, but they're not self-promoters and they've gotten lost in the shuffle. With a little bit of investment, those types of employees can become incredible contributors and help you fill a hiring gap. And the skill matrix is designed to help you see those opportunities. So are you ready to write your employment ad yet? Well, not quite. With the insight you gain from your SWOT and the skills analysis that you just did, now you can more carefully assess your needs. So take a look at the list of questions on this slide. Most job ad writers start with question number 6. What skills must this person have to successfully complete this task? But the 5 questions that come before number 6 are far more important than any skills list. And answering those questions gives you insight that will further refine your understanding of who you need to hire. So the first 5 questions, what business value must I gain from this person? And what responsibilities must this person be given in order to deliver that value? And then what tasks will this person do to deliver on those responsibilities? And which people will this person interact with within my business? And what personality attributes are going to be the most important in this role, given all of these interactions they're going to have and the value I need them to bring? Those 5 questions help you envision the type of employee that you need and help you imagine them working within your environment. Once you imagine what kind of personality will be successful within that group of people, what their day will be like, you're able to anticipate the person who's the right fit for the job you have available. And fit, sometimes even more than skills, determines success when you're hiring. Fit, more than pay, more than perks, more than hours worked, will determine how happy the employee is in that job, which will help reduce your turnover. So I strongly recommend that you do this needs assessment and that you do it in writing, not just in your head, not just in discussion with your business partner or your managers. Writing forces you to think about and articulate your needs in a way that simply thinking about them does not. So you've compiled your needs assessment because you've done your skills matrix and your SWOT. Now you have enough information not to do the ad, but to do a reasonable job description. I'm not a fan of traditional static job descriptions, though. The typical job description is just like a laundry list of tasks, and there's no context or clear purpose. So over the years, I've developed something I call a purpose and results oriented, or PRO, job description. And it focuses first on the purpose of the job for which someone's hired, which assures that the candidate understands and embraces not just the things they're supposed to do, but the value you need them to contribute. Describing results, so purpose helps them understand what value they bring, helps you understand what value you expect. Then describing results helps your candidate maintain focus on the expectations, not just the tasks. And articulating both of these things will help you write a better job ad. Every company or every job in a company requires 4 types of knowledge. And we forget about this a lot. It needs company knowledge, theoretical knowledge, practical knowledge, and then specific skills and activities. So the PRO job description looks for ways to embed all 4 types of these knowledge in a job description. That way, you give employees a comprehensive understanding of what they need to do to be successful. And at this phase in the hiring and recruiting process, you give yourself the gift of clarity about what you really need somebody to bring when you hire them or promote them from within. So here's an example. This is just a snippet of a PRO job description, but it gives you a sense of how it's structured. So at the very top, we start by considering the purpose of the job. If you've never tried articulating the purpose of one of the jobs in your shop, you may be surprised how difficult it is to put it into words. So is the purpose of your floor sales staff to answer questions? Or is it to educate your customer? Or is it to upsell or to fetch things? Or are those just tasks? Perhaps the best way to express the purpose of your floor sales staff is to say something like, it's to create customer relationships that are long-term and profitable for both the customer and the company. When you tell somebody, this is the purpose of the job I'm hiring you for, it informs everything they do. They understand that there's a higher purpose at work. And when each employee understands the ultimate purpose of the tasks they're asked to do, they not only understand the value of those tasks better, they also do a better job of anticipating what other tasks need to be done. And isn't that always a struggle for a small business or for any business, for employees not to just do the things they were told to do, but there's always that, I wish everyone were like Anne. Anne always anticipates what's needed. Anne probably naturally figured out the purpose of the job. Not everyone does, but if you deliver purpose information to the employee, then they can start anticipating more because they understand the greater context of the role that you want them to do. And you help create more Anns. Like I said earlier, most jobs descriptions just list the activities. But it's really important to perform the activities that aren't spelled out. And so by structuring a PRO job description in this way, we say, okay, here's an activity, manage response to customer inquiries, which is part of the purpose. And then what are the tasks involved in managing responses to customer inquiries in this example? we're giving employees a roadmap by constructing job descriptions in this way. And I encourage you, when you're in the employee sales funnel, your job descriptions could be right out there on your website. People could see, oh, there's a purpose. And these are the tasks. These are the tasks I would do and the results I would be expected to get. That person, in looking at your pro job description on your website, can imagine themselves in the role. And the person who'd be terrible at it, maybe they love gardening, but they would be terrible at working for your store. They can read this thing and say, oh, I didn't even imagine it would look anything like, different than gardening in my own garden or managing I'm really good with houseplants, but I think I'd be terrible at that. So by putting this information out there publicly, you're actually helping people qualify themselves out or in to your business's benefit. Sometimes people say, but it's impossible to list every single task that someone needs to know to do work on, in this example, the retail sales floor. It is possible to come really close. And the harder you think about it, the more successful your employees are likely to be when you really try to think through the tasks. But like I said before, even if you don't manage to write all of the tasks down, once you create a nearly comprehensive list, then your employees have a much better ability to fill in the gaps. And because you've given them so much more of the puzzle to work with and the context for it. Now, this type of job description requires a lot more work than any other type of job description, but it is so worth it. And it's a roadmap. It's a roadmap you can follow then, from writing your ad to reviewing the applications to interviewing and to hiring, and then on through orientation and onboarding and helping them be successful. It becomes this really useful tool through the rest of the hiring and recruiting process. So once you have done all these things, I guarantee you, when you sit down to write that employment ad, you are not going to struggle. You're going to know exactly what you need and why you need it and what the roadmap to success looks like. Unlike most help wanted ads, which tend to be sort of slapped together at the last minute, they're often copied from somebody else's Indeed or ZipRecruiter posting. Give your help wanted advertising a little bit more respect than that. Your company is unique, and so is your employment process. If selecting a spouse required writing a spouse wanted ad, then you'd probably put a tremendous amount of time and effort into finding your happily ever after. Well, okay, some of you work with your spouses, many of you work with your spouses, but your employees you're going to spend just as much time with. So I want you to put that much energy into writing your meaningful help wanted ad. Because this is a new relationship, and it's certainly more serious than choosing somebody to go to the gym with. Personal attributes come first, because it's easier to train someone to do a task than it is to train someone to be responsible or disciplined or emotionally healthy or a good communicator. You need healthy humans in your business, so hire them. Hire them that way. Also, and don't be afraid to ask for healthy humans. There's lots of different ways to, you can't run a help wanted ad saying, please, if you need therapy, don't apply. But there are different ways to express what healthy human looks like in your business culture. Also, different careers attract different types of people. You want a salesperson who's outgoing and willing to take some communication risks and willing to go out on a limb, but those attributes aren't necessarily desirable in a bookkeeper. So think about the kind of person that you want. Now, you may think it goes without saying that you need someone who's honest and hardworking and loyal and accountable and shows up on time, but it doesn't go without saying. So also say those things. Say what you're looking for and what fits your culture in your job ad. Summarize the personal characteristics that you seek in a paragraph. And this will help potential candidates steer themselves toward or away from your job, which saves everyone time and angst. Next, be really specific in your skill request. Most people will say yes to the question, can you use Microsoft Excel? But if super spreadsheeting is what you need, then make sure you request an Excel super user. The list of people who will claim that status is significantly smaller than the number of people who will say, yes, I can use Excel. Terms like master, journeyman, apprentice, experienced, certified, these are all really important terms that can be helpful. If that's not sufficient, then list specific types of things that you want people to be able to do. So overall, if a skill has a broad potential range of application, then be just as specific as you can be in your job ad to make sure you're attracting the right people. Of course, if you're willing to train, say you're willing to train. But specificity is really useful in a job ad. Some roles require previous education, others require relevant experience. In those cases, be specific. If you're saying or relevant experience, be specific about the types of experience you seek and why you seek that experience. Help people understand what you're looking for. If you need a bachelor's degree, or if you say, I need a bachelor's degree or equivalent, not all people will interpret that phrase or equivalent the same way. So it would be better to say that you seek this particular degree or 6 or more years functioning in this particular role. Now that's specific enough for people to put their teeth into. Now somebody may show up and that says, I only have 5 experience, but I think you should consider me because. A real go-getter will not get put off by that. And that's okay, because you might want a real go-getter with 5 years versus somebody really laid back with 7. So be specific and the right people will present themselves as a result. Another important element of your ad is what the ad shares about your company. So share information about your values, your philosophy, your benefits package, and any other information you can think of that will entice candidates to come to you as a potential employer. Some people get stuck trying to write the 50 words or less ad. That's because that's the wrong place to start. You've done all this thinking. You've got some pages taped on your wall now, and you've thought through questions about the values that you offer and the qualities you're seeking. Don't try to write 50 words at first. Write a 4-paragraph job ad with 1 paragraph for each of the sections that we just discussed on the previous slide. Write a full page, write 2 pages at first. Get all your ideas on the paper. Then distill it for the areas where you need the smaller amount of words. But starting with 50 words is just too hard. So start with the fully developed description and then edit down for each type of job you'll be running. Many job posting environments will now allow you to link to a longer form, or just have the longer form on your website and say, for more information, go to our website. You have more options than ever before for advertising for talent, and a lot of them work. It's not just digital. Most things are digital these days. Job sites like Indeed and ZipRecruiter can be great ways to find employees. Job boards like industry job boards, local job boards, online extensions from local colleges, all of those things can be great. But also local newspaper works in some places for job ads. It doesn't work in others. So you need to look at your own area, try a local newspaper ad and see if it works. They're cheap as can be. If it doesn't work, don't do it again. Or ask some of your other community business owners what they're using that works. But don't turn away from traditional media because it might work in your area. But anyway, advertise in lots of different places and see what works. Get rid of the things that don't work and expand the things that do work, because there's no magic formula for what works for job advertising. All of these things work in some places and all of these don't work for other types of businesses. So figure out the mix that works for you. And as you can see, I spent the least amount of time talking about where to advertise and how to write your ad, and the most amount of time talking about the content that should be going into this process to make sure you have the highest quality request, because the ad's the easiest part of the whole deal. The hardest part is building this long-term attraction funnel to recruit people to your business, because ideally you don't have to run an ad. I haven't run an ad for hiring in years. Ideally what you're going to do is pick up the phone or send a quick email to somebody that's come through your recruiting effort already and pick the people up that you need as you find you need them. So that was the information I wanted to share with you today, and I would love it to answer questions if you have questions. You guys still there? Looks like Ralph's screen is frozen. Or am I frozen? Gisela, you said we hire seasonal help. How do you deal with that? That's a great question. In fact, the companies that have the most successful seasonal hiring machines are the ones that do exactly what I described. And they create this entire stable of seasonal workers that they can call on when they need them, people who love to come back on a seasonal basis. So all of the things that I just described, only you're very clearly identifying some people that only want to work at Christmas time, some people that only want to work in the summer when they're, when they're not teaching. So it's clarity with the people that you're hiring about, what opportunities there are, and then doing a good job of understanding who's available for seasonal help. But hopefully building a stable so you don't have to find new seasonal help for each of your high seasons, because then your training burden is just too high. Does that help? Kelly, thank you, Katerina. I appreciate that. Ralph, I don't know if you can hear me, but you might want to exit the session and then come back in because it looks like your screen is frozen. Kelly, you said you missed the beginning of the presentation. Where can you view it? It'll be available on the Garden Center Show Facebook page. It will also be available on the Garden Center Show website.
There we go.
You're back.
Hey.
I was afraid I put you to sleep, and then I realized no, the screen's not moving. Katerina, how do you deal with a very competent employee that has an attitude? This is really important question, because it's like we have our rock stars at the work, but then they're like destructive, right? You do it by observing the specific behaviors. Like if you say, this is like beyond the hiring discussion. This is about people management, but it's a great question. So when somebody has attitude, if you say to somebody, you have a bad attitude, they say, no, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. It goes nowhere, right? So what you have to do is observe them very closely and see what behaviors that attitude is causing. And then you can say things like, John, when you roll your eyes at me or at Ralph in a meeting, see, this is specific. You're not guessing. They actually rolled their eyes. When you roll your eyes at me when I'm talking, I feel really disregarded and discounted because I interpret you rolling your eyes to mean you think what I'm saying is stupid. Now, am I interpreting that correctly? Now you can have a conversation that isn't yes, I did, no, I didn't. It's called an I statement. When you, observable behavior. I feel, now you own your feelings. You're not telling them they made you feel a certain way, because I interpret that to mean. Now John can say, oh, well, I just did that because there was something in my eye. Okay. Well, John, is there something in your eye Tuesday, Thursday, Friday? You just keep observing it. But there are observable behaviors that go along with attitude, and those are the things you want to address. And you need to let them know how they affect other people and how that does not fit within the business culture you're trying to create. Be very specific, calm, but let them know it's not working and what the impact is, and specifically what you want them to do differently.
I was just thinking that's great parenting advice as well.
Oh, my children are all in their 30s, right? But I still do it to them and they still hate it, but it works so well. It gets you out from underneath the emotional discussion and into the behavioral discussion. Gisela asks, how do I feel about providing a link to Indeed on your website for hiring? I think that can work. I like Indeed. I think Indeed works as a hiring mechanism. Some of the tools they have for doing a pre-interview are pretty useful. Just don't turn it all over to Indeed. Make sure you've got enough going on your website that people can really dig in and learn about you. But if you want to push the application process off to Indeed, that can work. Let's see, very helpful. And also as a close friend's daughter, yeah, that's tough when they're family. Those I statements are super beneficial for navigating tough relationships with people who have great qualities and then who also have irritating qualities, like all of us. So I like I statements. I'm expecting my first great-grandchild in the next few months. I'm very excited about this. And my granddaughter said to me, are you going to use I statements on him too? I'm like, absolutely. I use them on everybody. Any other questions? Well, while we're waiting for that, I understand we're going to have another great webinar next month. That'll be going out in our email soon. by another speaker who's doing a very interactive type of conference session at the Garden Center show in August. Oh, Natasha asked a question. Okay, we really want to hire a more diverse staff and make sure applicants understand we're inclusive. Is there a good way to word that? There is. I mean, you can talk about the fact that diversity and inclusion are important to you. Also, make sure you're showing it, because what you show is more powerful than what you say. So, and if you don't have the kind of diverse workforce you want yet, then of course showing a team that's not diverse isn't going to accomplish it for you, right? But make sure that any ads that you run, make sure the pictures that are on your website, make sure everything that your business does in terms of visual presentation includes an array of different types of people in that look. That will help a lot. Even if you can't show that the team is as diverse as you want it to be. But by all means, it's totally acceptable to just talk about diversity. It's okay to say, hey, we are working on being a more diverse organization. This is important to us. So you don't have to dance around it. Just be very direct about it. Just looking, did I anyone else's questions? You're welcome, Natasha.
We've got one from Gisela Mana about having a job fair.
Okay, how do you feel about having a job fair at our location since we have so many seasonal positions? I think that's amazing. I think it's a great way to invest in employment. Ideas for making it fun. Well, that's a fun question. I think some of the things that people would love to know more of at job fairs is like hearing from people who are actually doing the work, or give people an opportunity to do some job shadowing. I mean, garden centers are like my favorite place to hang out, right? Other than my own garden. So if I had the opportunity to, as part of a job fair, hang out with an employee and job shadow them for a period of time, even if it was just for an hour, that could be very exciting. So you're not just encouraging people to consider you as an employer, but you're giving them a glimpse into what that experience would be like. Another way that job fairs can be interesting and fun is to actually train people to do something. So invite them in, but then train them into doing something that your employees do that not everybody knows how to do or has the opportunity to do usually. So those are just a couple of ideas. I bet your employees would have a lot of ideas about how to make a job fair fun too. Jim, when we close this session, you will actually, oh, Kristen's answering that for you. But I'll answer it for everyone. When we close the session, you'll go to a landing page. There's a button to download the slides. Oh, and I've got to make sure. Okay, bookmark that page because we updated the slides at the last minute before this presentation. And I don't think that the new upload link got put on there because that was on me and I didn't do it. So the button may not work right away. We will also email everybody who's in this presentation the slides. And I promise you that button will be fixed like a hot 30 seconds after I get off this presentation. Any other questions? Well, it looks like we are 8 minutes past the hour, so I ran long. Sorry about that, guys. I hope that this was useful and helpful information for you. And I'll turn it back to Ralph for another plug for the Garden Center show.
Well, thank you all for coming. This has been terrific. I hope it's been of help to everyone who watched, and I hope you'll tell your friends about it. It will be available on gardencentershow.com, and since it was a Facebook Live, the replay will be on the Facebook page as well. Last thing I have to say is come to Milwaukee in August. I'd love to meet everyone in person. Register as soon as you can at gardencentershow.com. And please tell your suppliers, let them know you're going to the Garden Center show and you'd like to see them there. That will have an impact.
It will. And we really want this. There's no real show left from what I understand. There's no real show left for independent garden centers. So this is it. We want this to be the place that IGCs can go and really find everything they need and are looking for.
And we'd love to see it grow over the years too. We've got lots of ideas. Can't wait to implement them. And this year is it's really a test from our perspective because gosh, it's been so long, and it got postponed because of the Delta variant last summer. So we're kind of chomping at the bit to get out there and launch this.
Absolutely. Katarina's asking the dates.
August 9th through 11th, but August 8th, the day before the show, is when we'll be putting on the Garden Center Show tours. There are 5 independent garden centers around the Milwaukee area. We'll have buses, there'll be lunch. Should be a great thing. There will also be a boot camp that people can sign up for by Bob Megan of Whiz Bang Retail Academy. So it's going to be a tough choice between the tours and the Retail Academy. But we hope to see everyone there on the 8th while we're scurrying around trying to set up the show on the 9th through the 11th.
All right, everybody. I think that's a wrap for today. If you have questions, you can always reply to any of those emails that we send you. And hopefully we'll see you in August, or no, at our next webinar, which, Jim, what's the name of the presenter for our next webinar?
Joe Bear.
Joe Bear. That you're Ralph, but I could have asked you too.
That saves Jim from having to jump on.
So Joe Bear will be our next presenter, and we'll get you dates and content soon. All right, everybody, have a good rest of the day. Happy hiring.
Thanks.
Bye.